everyone, and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Thursday, November 17th, 2022, and this is episode 236. I'm Carol, also known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry, and I live east of Vancouver in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada, where it is sunny but very cold and windy today. I'm hoping the sound of the wind doesn't interfere with the recording. I do have my phone in a holder sitting on the windowsill, so it's very close to the outdoors. And I'm just hoping that the microphone doesn't pick up the sound of the wind, which could be a bit distracting. If you've watched for a while, you're probably thinking, hey, Carol's sitting in her downstairs guest bedroom, so it must be morning, and you would be correct. This is the room in which I have the best light in the morning, and I have a limited amount of time today to record, so I'm taking advantage of it, and I've moved my everything here downstairs. I will most likely not have a chance to edit today, and so most likely this episode won't go up until sometime tomorrow, probably tomorrow afternoon. Before we get into all the knitting, I just want to remind you that the Year of the Stash Make-Along is taking place in the Ravelry group. There's not much time left. We are nearing the end of the year, but it's not too late to take part. So if you're interested in working on some stash projects, stash is anything acquired prior to 2022, come on by and participate in the Year of the Stash chatter thread. And there is 1 month left in the Personal Sock Yarn Club. I've been giving a lot of thought to next year. As I mentioned last episode, I'm reluctant to let all the make-alongs go because I've really enjoyed seeing all the participation in the Ravelry group. I asked for some feedback regarding a Skein of the Month club, and I had a lot of good feedback about that. What I neglected to mention last time is that this isn't an original idea, but I've sort of stolen it from Lisa of Fiber Nymph Dye Works. Borrowed it, maybe that's a more kind way to put it, or less harsh sounding. Last year when I launched the Personal Sock Yarn Club, she kind of reworked it to suit her own needs, and she put away some special yarn for each month, not necessarily sock yarn. And that made me think that it might be more inclusive to do that for people this year. I also was thinking, rather than limit it to the skein of the month, I thought I would call it the yarn of the month. And that way people could use mini skeins, or maybe you have a couple of skeins of yarn that go together that you want to use. I started going through some of my stash, and I found that that was the case for me, and so I thought it would be as open, to make it as open, unlimited to as many people as possible. That's what I'm considering. I'm also thinking about, it will run very similar to the way the Personal Sock Yarn Club ran this year, but I think I'm going to limit it to 1 thread for each month rather than 2. And again, have it run for 2 months, so we have a couple of months to finish up our projects, but I'm only going to have 1 prize for the 1 thread. I am also considering just running the Year of the Stash chatter thread for another year, but not having a formal make-along and not awarding prizes for that. But I know how much I enjoyed the idea of knitting from stash, or making from stash this year, because I did do some weaving too. And I got such a good response to that I thought other people might want to continue that. So those are my ideas for next year. Again, feedback on that, greatly appreciated. Let me know what you think, because that will definitely influence how I do things next year. All right, what am I wearing? Well, the cold weather means that I've been getting actually a fair bit of use out of my knitted sweaters so far this, well, it's not officially winter, but it feels like it. We kind of went from summer right into a very brief fall and then straight into winter. We've had in a lot of days quite cool weather, sometimes wet, sometimes not. But yeah, it means it's sweater weather. So I knit this. It's Ashland by Julie Hoover. It's a Brooklyn tweed pattern. I knit it this past year from, I think, 4 colors. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 4 colors of Brooklyn tweed loft. I started it back in, I wrote it down. Oh, I started it last November, so a year ago, and I finished it in March of this year. So it is a colorwork pullover with set-in sleeves, and I'll come a little bit closer so you can see the colorwork on it. It called for 3 colors, but I introduced a 4th color into some of the colorwork. Long sleeves. It is sort of an A-line. You do, I think, 3 sets of, just realized my face is not in the picture. I think you do 3 or 4 sets of waist, it's knit from the bottom up. You do several sets of waist decreases, then 1 increase, and then you knit it straight from there. In retrospect, if I paid more attention and realized that that was the case, I either would have made the maybe cast on less stitches and just knit it straight, or else incorporated more shaping, because it's almost an A-line. And the one thing I'm not thrilled about it is it does fit quite loosely, and I prefer tighter sweaters. Not enough for me to rip it back and start over. I couldn't anyway, because I had to steek where the sleeves go. That's the only thing that I'm not crazy about. What I do like is it is light and it's warm, but not too warm. And I just have a little short sleeve shirt underneath. So yeah, again, really pleased to be making use of some of my knitted sweaters. I've made a real concentrated effort in the past couple of years to knit garments that well, not just garments, but, well, yeah, I guess just garments, because a lot of my shawls I don't necessarily wear or wear outside the house. But definitely wanted to knit some sweaters that were more practical, that fit into my casual mode of dressing, which is what I do 98% of the time. And so I think because of that, I am getting more use out of them. All right, let's move along. I have 2 finished projects this week. This one seems like it took forever, but really it was just over a month, I think. They are my winter, hang on a second, my winter palette Scrappy socks. So I knit these out of Fiber Nymph Dye Works, the leftovers from the winter palette half skein set that I used to knit a snow melt shawl. And I think I had about 85 grams left over, and I decided that I would make a pair of socks for the 4th quarter of the Fiber Nymph Dye Works Make It Your Own Make Along. My theme is the 4 seasons, and so because it's a winter palette, it fits into my theme. So I knit these from the toe up, which is not usual for me, but I wanted to make sure I could use up as much yarn as possible, and also not run out of yarn. You know, at the toes. So I will bring these in a little bit closer, tell you a little bit more about them. So I cast on using Judy's Magic Cast On. I did the toe out of the Hibernation Greige, and then I knit either 3 or 4 rounds of each of the other 5 colors, except for the sky blue, because I had a very small amount and I only was able to do 1 round every pattern repeat. I should mention too that I took all my scraps, I divided them exactly in half, and then I worked on these socks concurrently so that I knew that I would be able to, you know, duplicate the second sock. So yeah, Hibernation Greige, this was the Winter Palette Variegated. This was, no, I messed up. This was Icy Blue, Winter Palette Variegated, Hibernation Greige, Sunset, or Evergreen, Sunset Lavender, I think, or Sunset Purple. Then Icy Blue again, and then the Sky Blue. Hibernation Greige I used for the heels. That is a German short row heel. And then I used the variegated for the cuff. I was able to do 6 repeats of my pattern, and then at the end I just knit whatever I could with what I had remaining. So I followed the same color order, but the stripes were not the same width as they were down there. And I don't care. I just wanted to use up as much as I could because I really like my legs to be quite long, and if I had stopped after 6 repeats, they would have been a little bit shorter than I like. As I mentioned, I think last time, I was weaving in the ends as I went, and I thought after washing and blocking that perhaps the sort of texture from weaving in my ends might disappear, and I think it still will with wear and washing, but it's still, right now you can kind of see where all my ends were woven in because the texture is a little bit different. And I can see there is a line where I joined in my yarns, but that doesn't bother me either. I actually knit them in such a way that they're opposite, and so I can wear that towards the inside of my leg. Not that there's anybody looking at my legs that closely. I mean, face it, my socks are almost always covered up by a shoe or a slipper and pant leg. So, and if I'm wearing boots, you can't see them at all. So really, it's only for my own purposes that I did that. But anyway, I really love this color palette, and I am thrilled to have used up every bit. I can't remember, I think after I trimmed off all the ends, I think I end up with 80 grams, but I have to weigh that again and confirm it. And that was important because I am attempting to use 200 grams of Vibrant Dye Works yarn this quarter in the Mio Mel, because I've done that for the other 3 quarters, and that will earn me a special skein of yarn. So speaking of, last episode I told you that I was inspired to use up the leftovers from my 2020 holiday mini pops collection, and knit a little hat for my granddaughter. And so I did that. I think I cast it on the same day I recorded, or maybe the day after, and I just couldn't stop working on it. And so I finished it like in a couple of days. So what I did is I used Barley, is it Barley? Yeah, the Barley Light pattern by Tin Can Knits as a jumping off point. But again, I wanted to use up as much yarn as possible, and so rather than do a hat from the cuff up, I cast on using a pinhole cast on, and I started from the top. And I just reversed it. I just did increases where they said to do decreases. So I did that until I had the correct number of stitches for the size I wanted to make, which was the child size, I believe. And again, because I wasn't sure about yarn, I wasn't sure how far it would go, I didn't even only do X number of rounds with each color. I literally knit till I only had enough to weave in that end, and then I started the next color. And this would have been day 24. And I worked all my way back to day 2 because I had used up all of day 1 in my Scrappy socks that I knit from this yarn. So there are 23 different colors in here, and you can see like some of the stripes are wider than others. You can see that here, I think. It's hard to tell on the monitor on my phone, but I think you can see that. So it's not super noticeable, you know, in general, just looks like a stripy hat, but that way I could use it all up. And I had even enough to then have a turned up ribbed brim. So I put my first color in, I think, with the ribbing on the right side, and then I flipped it so that no matter how this brim got turned up, it would not have that look you get when you know, join in a color on the wrong side. So yeah, happy with that. I'm gonna give this to my granddaughter either for her birthday or Christmas, which is not even a week apart. So I'll decide when to, you know, which occasion to gift it to her. But hopefully she likes it. She's turning 8, so I think an 8-year-old would like those colors, and I'm hoping anyway. And honestly, if she never wears it, I'll never know. So that gives me 2 projects. I can't remember how much was left here. I think this used 50 grams exactly, if I'm remembering correctly. Actually, now that I say that, I think that's what it was. And then that leaves me with one more project for the meal mill, and it happens to be my November personal sock yarn club socks. So they are being knit from Fiber Nymph Dye Works. Hang on, just trying to sort something out here. Fiber Nymph Dye Works Bronzed Sparkle in the Sugar Plumbed colorway. And so I'm getting pretty far on them. Let me just slip this one onto a sock blocker. I have one ready for the toe, and then the other one I think is about 2 stripes shy of that same spot. So they are getting very close to being done. The furnace just kicked on. It's also that time of year. I'm hoping it's not going to be too loud. I really don't have time today to kind of stop and wait for it to shut off. So yeah, there's the one sock. So I had purchased a mini in the Merlot colorway when I got this skein for the express purpose of doing heels with it. So I decided to switch it up to an Eye of Partridge heel rather than just a traditional slip stitch heel. Other than that, it's a traditional heel flap and gusset construction, top down obviously because it's missing a toe. 64 stitches, 2mm needles, 2x2 rib. And yeah, like I said, I'm ready for the toe on this one. And here's sock number 2. So very, very close to being done. I'm really looking forward to that point because then I will have completed my goals for the Miomel this quarter, and I can then turn my attention to some other projects that I'm trying to get finished up by the end of the month and before I get my new advent and all of that in December. So one more work in progress to show you, which is also almost done. That is my Twists and Turns by Stephen West. Even though this is now no longer a spoiler, I'll just give you, just in case you're in the same position as I am, I'll give you a heads up that I'm going to talk about it now. I'll try to remember to put timestamps in, but I'm feeling less cautious about it. Stephen West himself has revealed it and said you no longer have to worry about spoilers, but just in case. So I think last time we spoke, I was still working on the second band that extended from the bottom of the shawl. Now I'm going to see if I can show this without showing spoilers. So that was clue one. Clue two looked like that. I have since done the I-cord embellishment that came out, I think, in clue 3, which I love. I just love that feature. And I have since finished the bands. Now, part of clue 4 has you working out from each side and picking up stitches along this band. And I have completed that on one side. Hooray! And I am about halfway on the other side. But I am happy to report that I've already finished the bottom of the shawl. So when I finish this part, I will be done. Now, when I was finishing up working on clue 3, I went ahead and watched clue 4, watched the clue 4, let's try that again. I went ahead and watched the video that Stephen West had put out for clue 4. I wanted to sort of think about what was coming next while I was working on that last bit of clue 3. And when he started working on the bottom and adding in the accent color, I really liked how that looked. And then he went ahead and he added a whole bunch more of these zigzags. And they extended below the other part of the shawl. I'm sure most of you have already seen the completed shawl, so I'm not giving anything away, and if I am, well, I already warned you about spoilers. And I was perfectly prepared to do that. And then while I was on YouTube, a thumbnail from, let me think of what it's called. Oh shoot, I meant to write it down. There was a thumbnail from another video podcast that I had not heard of before. And I will put the name of it down at the bottom. I apologize for not remembering. Oh, I am a Sarah. I think that's what it is. And I saw it and loved it. It caught my eye immediately, and I thought, that's what I want to do on the bottom of my shawl. And then in watching the episode, I learned that it was something she had seen from, I think it's the Knitting Hobbit. And so I went ahead and watched that podcast too, and she had provided some instructions on her Ravelry project page on how to do it. So I used that as a guideline, and then I went ahead and did a little bit of my own trick for finishing it off. So now that I've talked about it, I'm going to show it to you. And it hasn't been blocked, so it looks a little bit wavy and pulled up, but I'm pretty sure it's going to block out. So this is how I finished my bottom. So I have these 4 scallops at the end of the zigzag section. So I'm going to bring that in closer so you can see. So each scallop has the 1x1 twisted rib that was featured in this section and also featured in this section. So I liked how that tied that in, and you basically work short rows out from the center point here, and then you do an I-cord along the edge, and you do it in such a way that your I-cord goes through these loops from this section and keeps them in place. So there was no sewing down of anything like in Stephen West's version, and I just really liked it. I liked how the edging, I kind of need to stand up. I like how the edging went to about the same length as this one, and I liked how this kind of swoops down, and I liked how it carried on that kind of swoop. So what I did when in order to have the I-cord go through these loops, is I can't remember which end I actually started the I-cord, but I fed through from the other direction through all the loops. I threaded through the tail end of the yarn. So I could then, as I knit, like I threaded it in the reverse direction that I was going to knit. I think that makes sense. So that as I knit, I was able to pull new yarn through those loops and feed it all through. And then when I got to the other end and had to work my way back, because this is a non-superwash wool, it wet splices really well. And so I ended up breaking the yarn, feeding it back through again, splicing the yarn together before I started knitting, and then I was able to again just pull the yarn as I needed it. So I didn't end up having to have all those ends to weave in, and it was a really easy way to just keep the continuity. Probably that doesn't make a lot of sense, but just it's the best I can explain it. So yes, I am delighted to almost be finished with this. I'm not sure if I could even show you in one shot. Okay, I guess I can, sort of. That's how it looks from the center out. As you can see, it's this super, super wide shawl, wide and shallow. But I really like how it's turned out. I'm really happy with my choice of colors and yarn. So this is Cascade 220 fingering, and the dark is color 8400 charcoal. Whoops. The light is 8401 silver, and then the red is 9404 ruby. So yeah, there is my almost finished twists and turns. By next week, it should be all finished and blocked, and I can't wait till that is the case. I am actually really enjoying this section with the striping and eating up that band. So I'm not hating working on it. I'm just at the point where I'm ready to be done. As you know, it's taken me way longer just because of circumstances. So I haven't felt the same pressure to finish every clue by a certain time, which I think has been a real blessing, because I knew right away it was going to be just a work on it at my own pace project. And so I think in a way that's allowed me to enjoy it more than some other people have knit it who really felt the time crunch. I know it's sort of self-imposed, and it's something they chose to do, but at the same time, it can take some joy out of a project when you have to have it done by a deadline. I know that from experience. I went ahead along the edge and I marked out every 4 slipped stitches so that I would be able to keep on track. I could be finished by now. I had gotten to probably about here on this side, and I was looking at how much band I had left. I was looking at the number of stitches that I had left here, and I was worried that I had done something wrong and that I would have too many stitches left over here on the band. And then when I stopped to look at it more critically, one thing I realized is way back here, instead of knitting 4 rows of the charcoal, I had only knit 2. And there was just no way I was going to let that stay. And so I ended up having to rip all that back and reknit it. So it's probably a little more than what I have left to do on the other side. So in that sense, I could be showing you a finished shawl today, but I'd rather do it right than do it fast. As it turned out, then I did the same on this side. I started marking the rows where the last stripe of each repeat would eat up that stitch. And then I also started counting my stitches after every 8 rows, just making sure I was on track. And I'm glad I did, because there were a couple cases where I had messed up and had to pick back. So that's what I'm doing on this side too. So far, so good. It should all work out like the other side. Okay, I feel like that's a lot of talking about one project. I'm gonna put that away and I'm gonna take a sip of tea here. So as I mentioned last week, I was quite enthused by the Hyber Knit Along shawl by Stephen West this year. It's called the Aurora Cabin Shawl. He had put together 2 color palettes that were available from Stephen and Penelope, but I thought that I surely, with as much stash as I have, would be able to put together a color palette from my stash. And actually I ended up pulling out basically all of my fingering weight yarns. They were all over my craft room and all over my bed, and I started to play. And I ended up narrowing it down to 2 color palettes. So I thought I would show those to you. So the first one, I kind of looked at his sets, and there seemed to be 2 lights, a dark, and 2 mediums. So that's kind of what I used as a guideline for when I was putting my sets together. So one is, I had these 2 skeins from Fiddly Dye Works that I bought together. And then I have this skein from Sweet Fiber, which blended in well. I had this bright blue tonal skein from, I think it's Indigo something. Indigo Moon. I don't think she's dying anymore. She's from Gabriola Island, which is in British Columbia. I'm not sure what, I should be careful about saying that, but I just feel like I realized she wasn't dying anymore. And then, so I had all that, which unfortunately you can't see super well against my sweater. I'll come in a little closer too. And then I had bought this cone of yarn years and years ago, I think from Webs. And I haven't decided yet. I can't remember if it's fingering. I'm going to be doing swatching anyway. I might hold it double or I might not have to. But yeah, that should give you a better look. So I like that palette. It's kind of cool and wintry in a way. Okay, I'm going to put these back in here. It's already such a mess on this bed here. I don't want to make it any worse. So I'll just quickly tuck these back into my project bag here. And then I put my other set in this bag I got from the Loopy U a million years ago. And, okay, so this is a skein of Malabrigo sock. This, oh, it's Pigeon Roof Studios. I'm not sure if they're dying anymore either. In the hydrangea colorway, you probably can't see that. It's kind of blowing out. So those two. I didn't think to even write these down before I recorded, so some of them I'm having to remember. I used this skein for my Yellow Brick Rodeo. It's from Flock Fiber Studio in the, I think it's Winter Dawn colorway. I just about lost that. Frozen Dawn. I'm going to put these down for a sec. It's hard holding 5 skeins of yarn, especially when they're wound up. This I bought when I was in Alaska. And that was in 2010, I think. This I bought. Okay, it's from the Alaskan Yarn Company. It says it's a local yarn shop in Homer, Alaska, but I didn't buy it in Homer because we didn't go there. I can't remember which stop. We were on an Alaskan cruise. Anyway, this color is called Forget Me Not. It's from the Alaskan Yarn Company. And it's a merino cashmere nylon blend. Oh no, it's not. It just feels really soft. It's just a merino nylon blend. It's got those little specks of purple in there. And finally, this one from Stunning String Studios. It is the Plum Pudding colorway, and it's 100% superwash merino. So let's see if I can put all of these together. Let's see that one there. So that's my second color palette. Have not yet decided. But I'm going to keep them both set aside. As I said last episode, I don't expect that I will be, sort of be knitting along. I think if I feel like casting it on before December 26th, I will. And I do not sort of I'm not going to worry about finishing it by a certain time, or, you know, I'm not interested in prizes or knitting along or any of that. I just love the pattern and just want to knit it. And so the next step is just deciding which yarns to go with. But I will tell you that that project is going to be competing with a couple of others. As I mentioned, I don't know if it was last episode or I think it was one or two before that, I really want to knit Sean by Elizabeth Doherty, and I have the yarn. And then just since I recorded last, another pattern came across my radar, and that is called Richmond Hill Pullover by Mary Pranica of Blue Sky Fibers. I just have a black and white photo of it, but I will insert a color photo. So I was watching, I'm not sure if it was their latest episode of Knit Together with Kim and Jonna, and this sweater had been knit by the as a sample for the yarn shop that they record in, and it was in their background, and right near the end of the podcast they mentioned it, which sent me down the rabbit hole of, oh, where can I get the pattern and what yarn can I use? And as it so turned out, we were heading to Victoria later that week, and Beehive Wool Shop, which I love to visit whenever I get a chance when I'm there, they carried the yarn that the original was knit in. And so usually when I go to Beehive, I just go and browse and see what catches my eye. But this time I went with a purpose, and I picked out yarn for this sweater. Now, before I went, I had I didn't want to do the same color palette as the original. It was a dark green, kind of similar to this. And I have a number of green sweaters. I decided I needed to break out of that. And so I had put together a potential color palette, and then I thought once I got there and saw the colors in person, I, had the potential to change my mind. And I did end up changing my mind, partly because they didn't have all the colors that I had chosen beforehand, and partly because seeing them in person did make me see some other possibilities. So I ended up laying out two palettes on the table and kind of going back and forth between them. One was autumn colors. I was looking at brown for the main color with some fall colors for the sleeves. But in the end, I went with a cooler palette. So got my bag of loveliness here, and I'll pull it out to show you. So again, might be hard to show them all because there's quite a few. So Woolstock Light is the yarn that it was originally knit in. It is a 100% fine Highland wool, and it is singles, similar to like Tosh Merino Light, something like that. As you can see, the colors, I hope you can see, the colors are not flat. They have a lot of depth and tonality to them. So I decided on deep velvet as my main color. So these kind of burgundies, plummy purples, that's a good color for me to have right against my face. And then I went through the charts and I played with combinations. So I'm just going to show them kind of in the order that they would be in the charts, but I also intend to do some playing around, some swatching, and seeing, you know, what my final choice will be. So I chose to go next to the plum, or what's it called, velvet, deep velvet. To go next to that, this is called Spring Ice. It's kind of a medium blue. This one is called Highland Fleece. It's just a neutral, natural color, undyed. That's the word I'm looking for. It gets used with these two colors together so that they're never side by side, so it will break up the colors. Otherwise, I think they're too similar in tone, but because they are separated by the cream color, I think that works. So this is Lilac Bloom, kind of a dusty rose. This one is Loon Lake, kind of a tealy blue in a way. So I've got, so far, those 5. And then I couldn't decide on the final combination. There's this dark blue, which is called Midnight Sea. I'll see if hopefully that, I think you can see there. So I came home with both of these to go with that. And I may use one or I might use both depending on the pattern, because there are all sorts of different little motifs that I don't think they repeat. This one is called Thermal Spring, and this one is Quartz Crystal. And so if I were to hold them all up and bring them in, whoops, that's the palette. Oops, you can't see the pink here. Oh dear, I knew that was going to happen. It is hard to hold this much yarn at once. Anyway, that gives you an idea. So I can't wait to get swatching and try some of these color combinations together and see what I think. So yeah, that one I'm really anxious to cast on too. And I did buy a couple of gift skeins for the knitters in my family. So I'm not going to show those to you just in case. Don't think either generally watches, but just in case. I also picked up a couple of other skeins because once I finished out my color palette for the Richmond Hill pullover, I just browsed. And it was fantastic because Cameron had was there. He had to go in and pick up something at another store, and then he just came back to the car and just read. So he texted me, stand back at the car, take as much time as you want. So I didn't feel pressured. It was awesome because quite often I don't get much time in there, and I just don't have the chance to really browse. So this time, or not browse as long as I'd like, put it that way. This one is a sock yarn from Lendenor called Paint Sock. Let's see if that label will come. Everything's so blown out because of the lighting. Oh, there you go. Lendenor Paint Sock. And hopefully what you can see is it's a striped sock, and you can make 2 identical socks out of this skein. So I just liked the colors. I thought they were really pretty. And then I also, this just drew me in. This is from Artfl, Belle, This is in the Bering Sea colorway. So there now. And then there's a mini Belle, or tiny Belle as they call it. This is it Cape Verde or Cape Verde? I don't know how to say it. Cape Verde, feel like it's Cape Verde, but I could be wrong. So that would be for the heels. So just thought they were really pretty. I loved the speckles. So one more acquisition to share with you, but this one was a gift from a knitting friend. And it is the Shetland Wool Week Annual for 2021. And just as I was heading, we were on our way to Victoria, and I went on Ravelry for something and had a message there to say that she had sent it, and then she had accidentally bought it instead of the 2022 one, and she already owned 2021. So she kindly sent it to me, and so it was actually waiting for me when I got home on the Sunday. It had gotten delivered on the Thursday when we left. So I've gone through and marked a few of the projects that really caught my eye. I won't show them all to you, and since it's last year's, I'm sure many of you have seen it. But The Crofter's Cap by Wilma Malcolmson. And I love this page because there's like 5 different color palettes. So it really gives you an idea of what you can do with that hat. This is such a beautiful book with gorgeous photographs. Like, look at how beautiful is that. Look at that. It's just a beautiful book to look through and read. I haven't read all the articles yet, but I've started. Then there's, I don't know how to say this, Da Maid's Mitts, maybe, by Alison Rendell. So that, you don't see the mitts really well in that picture, but it's a gorgeous picture. That's the ones that are on the front. And again, they've got them shown in different color palettes. This one I love. It's from Anne Unson, Shetland Shawl. I'm going to show that to you because I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. It is beautiful. It's a beautiful lace weight shawl, which is why I hesitate. It is that shape, kind of a crescent. And there's one picture in here. Yeah, look how gorgeous. I love that. Another hat, the Sumberg Light Hat by Janet Budge, which looks like that. Again, I know there are better photos. Yeah, there's. Can you tell I'm kind of in the mood to do some color work? And then this one I thought was really pretty too, the Gotland Lace Yoke by Wilma Malcolmson. So another one by her. So it's a yoked sweater that has like the chevrons or feather and fan type lace striping at the top. So thank you again, you know who you are, and I so appreciate this. I've never had a Shetland Wool Week book before, but I can see why they're so popular. They're gorgeous. Even just if you never knit anything out of them, just to own them and read them and look through them. I'm going to take another sip here and I'll just finish things up. Finish things up with what's been going on since we last spoke a couple of weeks ago. So as I mentioned, we did go to Victoria on Vancouver Island to visit my mother-in-law. She was a vet, or she is a vet, I should say. She served in the Canadian Army during World War II. And with that in mind, and also the fact that because of Remembrance Day, we can often make a long weekend out of that weekend that's adjacent to that holiday, we quite often go over and see her at that time of year. So this year Remembrance Day was Friday, so Cameron took Thursday off and we headed over on Thursday, and then we ended up coming back on Saturday and avoided the worst of the ferry traffic that way. On Remembrance Day, well, she lives in an extended care home, which is actually geared towards veterans. It's actually called Veterans Memorial Lodge, and many of the residents are veterans. And about a week before we went, we were looking at their policies on whether or not the public could attend Remembrance Day ceremonies this year. For the past 2 years, because of COVID, we haven't been able to. And at that time, that was still the policy. So the plan was that we would go and visit her that afternoon in her room. And then the next day we were going to take her out for lunch along with Cameron's brother and his wife. But things changed before we went, and they had arranged to do several small Remembrance Day ceremonies, one for each of the different buildings. And so we were allowed to attend those. So we had to be masked, and we had to have had a negative COVID test and have our temperature checked and all that stuff, which is totally fine. We were just thrilled we were going to be able to be there with her for that. And I would say it was the best, most impactful Remembrance Day ceremony I've ever attended. It was held in their, where they have their, in their dining area. And there were 27 veterans there, pretty sure, somewhere around that anyway. And with some with their families, and then other residents also. And different residents did some readings, and such as Flanders Fields, and I'm blanking on the other things. And they ranged in age and volume. Some were pretty quiet, but there was a microphone, and so we could hear it. But one gentleman who was 102, he was so strong. I mean, we always think people who are older are weaker, but his personality shone right through, and he had a very strong voice, and he actually said, "Oh, I don't need a microphone," and the activities person who was hosting it said, "Oh, I'm going to use it anyway. I'll hold it for you." And his voice just rang out. It was just really neat. We all kind of chuckled with, "I don't need a microphone," and it's true, he probably didn't. But what was so amazing, though, was that the person coordinating it went around to each veteran, and he was just looking for them to introduce themselves, say in which branch of the services they had served and for how long. But what happened was many of them had some anecdote about their time in service. One man in particular was describing a bombing mission that he was on during World War II, and it was like he was back there reliving it. Not in a frightful way, but just you could tell that memory is just etched on his mind. He will never forget it. And he was describing how they had a spotlight on them, and then that one of the engines failed, but everything went well and they were able to head back to safety, and it just brought it to life. And I think that's why this particular ceremony was just so meaningful, because kind of an abstract thing. Now, my father-in-law was in the Navy, and I've heard some stories from him. So it's not like and my uncle was in the Army, and I heard stories from him. It's not like I haven't heard vets tell stories before, but somehow being in that room with so many of them at once, and so many of them sharing their experiences, it was just very, very meaningful. And then what we did afterwards is go back to my mother-in-law's room for a brief visit, and then we did go out for lunch that day. And then the following day, Cameron and I went to visit her again, and then we headed to the ferry from there. So actually all the timing worked out really well, and that gave us a day, a full day on Sunday before Cameron had to go back to work on Monday. And what we did that day is we'd been invited to go to lunch at our daughter-in-law's grandparents' place. Because of COVID and the fact that we had to have a very small wedding, we had not had the opportunity to meet anyone in her family beyond her parents. And so she said it was a casual lunch, and while people were dressed casually, it was not a casual lunch as far as the food that was being served. They had a big ham and a roasted chicken and mashed potatoes and vegetables and stuffing and some beautiful desserts. And I mean, it was what I would consider quite a festive dinner. But it was very nice to meet all of her relatives at last. Besides her grandparents, there were a couple of aunts and uncles and her cousins and her parents also. And so that was really great to finally meet her extended family. We still haven't met her sister and her husband. It just hasn't worked out. You think that would be the easiest ones to meet, but that just hasn't happened yet. But yeah, it was just really, really enjoyable. So a nice way to end off the weekend. So the reason I'm recording this morning, I'm just actually going to check the time. Yeah, it's just about 12:30. I did start earlier, just probably, well, it's probably gone on for maybe over an hour between setting up and recording. I don't know. For the next little while, next couple 3 weeks, I am going to be doing, or I have been doing, and I'm going to continue to be doing after school care for our younger granddaughter. Her after school care kind of fell through for a reason I don't need to talk about, our daughter is in the process of transitioning from the position she has at work now to a position where she will be working from home. And so after she begins her new position, she will be able to go and pick up her daughter from school herself and have her at home while she works. But until that, she needs something to fill in the gap. And so that's where Grandma comes in. And so I need to leave here about 2 o'clock every afternoon and go over to her school, pick her up, and then I stay until either her, our older granddaughter comes home, or our son-in-law But many days our older granddaughter has after school activities of various sorts. And so most days I'll be there till like around 5 or so. So by the time I get home, it's close to 5:30. So that's a big chunk out of my day for a little while. On the plus side, get to see my grandkids. My grandson doesn't really need care. Normally he would just come home and be on his own, but obviously I'm there, so I get to see him too. And it's also a time where I can get some knitting done because once they come home from school and get their snacks and all that stuff, they're, doing their thing. They're ready to watch TV or play a video game or play with toys or whatever. And so I get to spend a fair bit of that time hanging out with them and knitting. So it's not a bad thing. And I know it's only temporary. But that's why I know there's no way I'm going to get this edited. I got a couple of things to do before I have to leave, including having lunch. So I will wrap this up in a couple minutes. Oh yeah, another thing. Last night, I thought about this for my something good, but I have something else for that. Yesterday, I think it was last evening, my husband realized that our fridge was not cooling. Fridge and freezer were not cooling properly. We realized the fan wasn't kicking in, and kind of had let's just see how it, let's give it a bit of time. Let's see if anything, if it kicks in this evening. And it wasn't, and so I Googled, how, troubleshooting for that. And I know recently one of my sisters had that problem, and all it turned out to be was that their fridge and freezer were too full and the air wasn't able to circulate, and so the fan wasn't running. But we followed some other troubleshooting things first, and then we proceeded to empty out the freezer, managed to cram everything into our deep freeze, and we have a little front opening freezer also in the garage. So we were able to put everything away, and then we proceeded to clean out the fridge, which meant that we got rid of a bunch of stuff that we probably should have gotten rid of a while ago, and we were able to create a lot more space. And then it was, okay, let's hope for the best. And it was probably within a half an hour, I heard the fan kick on. And it has proceeded to work properly since then. So, thank goodness we didn't have to call repairmen. We are planning on renovating our kitchen in the new year and getting new appliances. And it was like, please just hold on until we get a new fridge. We really want to wait till we know what we're doing with our kitchen before we figure out what appliances we want. So we didn't want to just have to go out and buy a fridge because we needed it. So yes, thankfully, everything's working fine. I'm going to move some of the freezer stuff back into the freezer tonight. So that turned out to be something good after all. But my actual something good for this week is that our older granddaughter has taken up curling. So when we got back from holidays, we were on the way back from the airport, and she texted me to say, could she come and watch us curl sometime? And I said, yeah, we're curling tomorrow night. You want to come and watch? And so she came, and her friend met her there. Her friend is on the school curling team. And while we were curling, and one of our teammates said, oh, I won't say the family name, but she's a something. This is her last name. And it's a family that's in the club that are really well known. They're all good curlers. So she said, boy, that's a good person for her to be learning from and curling with. And so I think it was week and a half ago or so, um, I got a text to say, I'm curling right now. And she was with her friend at the club. And then I talked to her about it yesterday. So she is joining the school team, or she has joined the school team. Right now they're just practicing on Thursdays, but in the new year they'll actually start playing, and I guess be playing against some other clubs in the region. So turned out her friend's dad, who's an excellent curler, was working with her one day and somebody else another. So she's getting instruction from some really good curlers. So I think that bodes well for her. But she's enjoying it so far. That's, of course, the most important part. And it's good exercise besides. So yeah, that's kind of cool that she's taken up curling. I think that is it for today's episode. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. If all goes well, I will record again next week. I had actually planned to record yesterday, but I ended up sparing for curling yesterday morning. So if I don't have to do that next week, I'll probably record Wednesday morning and edit on Thursday, but it might end up being a Thursday recording, Friday editing thing again. We'll see. Eventually, you will see another episode, whether it's next week or the week after. So take care until then. In the meantime, enjoy your knitting, and thank you as always so much for watching and for all your lovely comments. So I'll see you again, hopefully very soon. Bye for now. Have a great day.